Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Daily Tip Show here on the Inspired Business TV channel. Now today we are going to look at the SynaGus method and in particular the CUC Learning Loop. Have you ever been in a situation where some days you shift your thinking through learning and you find it seamless, it just happens? Yet other days you're trying to get a new understanding. You're trying to think differently, but you still keep going through the same old pattern. And you think to yourself, why? Well, this episode is going to help you understand how to consistently move forward. My name's Gary Setterfield, and I'm here with my business partner and great friend and mentor, Sukhi Wahiwala.
Hello team, hi Inspired Tribe once again, and these little bite-sized chunks on our daily tip show, business tips, life tips and mindset tips. This is actually such a blessing and such a humble honor for us to share with you on a one-to-one basis through YouTube as a medium. Back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Sukhi. Well, Sukhi, you and I have been working together for 7 years plus closely. And I want to share with people the inner realms, the inner sanctum, the part of you that I see when we have these little discussions, because I know that there is, from discussions we've had, a replicable system, which we call the CUC Learning Loop, which enables people to consistently understand what it is they need to learn and how to move forward. So do you mind if I share that and you share that with our audience and especially our Inspired Tribe team?
Oh, Gary, yes, absolutely. This is it's an honor to be sharing the SynaGus method that I've authored with the world. And working with yourself, and I'm not going to soppy this episode up, but working with yourself is also a gift that is also part of my blessings for this life as well. So with reference to the SynaGus method is designed specifically to give you the spiritual connection through science and quantum science, and to incorporate into practical, easy to use steps. That's the principle, that's the vision that I have behind the SynaGus method. Now it's quite a mature thinking. It sits on deep psychometrics, social understanding, inner world, outer world, also how to use little encrypted tools to move yourself further forward. So for this episode, as you suggested there, Gary, we'll talk about the CUC Learning Loop. Now, if I can just clarify, if it's okay with yourself, what CUC means. We stand C. The first C stands for conscious. Now, in conscious, we're talking about, well, let's just clarify and then I'll go through it all. So conscious, the U stands for unconscious. So conscious and unconscious. And then logically, the last C stands for consciousness. And then the learning, because it's actually, this is the actual key scientific tool that you can understand, learn, and repeat again and again to encourage your mind to shift its way and perspective. So if you were to learn something new, unless you've gone through these 3 steps, you won't shift through and acknowledge the learning. That's what we're trying to say here. And by the way, this is not a big claim or understanding. Please understand when I use the words I, me, this is not about me. I feel myself nothing more than a channel of information that passes through the information in the open ether, and we're just making sense of it. So the CUC is the conscious, unconscious, consciousness learning loop. Now this is a very core part of all learning and understanding within the SynaGus method, and ironically, in everyone's life. Does that make sense there, Gary?
It does. So what's the first tip or the first part of this loop?
Okay, so if we were to look at what is the loop first, what is the purpose of this loop? conscious, unconscious, consciousness. So if you can see, I'm saying consciousness is my mind. Unconsciousness is kind of the spirit area, whether we talk it the heart, whether we talk ourselves our central chakra, heart chakra center, whatever it is, it's the unconscious mind. Now here, I mean the conscious brain is our 10% or 5% conscious usage of our mind. Does that make sense? And then there is 90% or 95% of our unconscious brain, the rest of it, which is plugging away, which we can't necessarily adjust and control. It's the kind of thing that makes us blink. It's the kind of thing that helps us breathe. It's the heart beating. It's the, if you cut yourself, it's the automatic repairing. That's the unconscious realm we're talking about. So what we're also likening this to is one of my tribe people also know is that very, very clearly, all of our learnings, all of our education, and of course, we'll pop a link down below that please get involved, turn up into our social calls, our Feel Good Friday social calls, which tend to open up the weekend. It's the perfect start to a weekend between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock every Friday, called the Feel Good Friday social Zoom calls currently. And we'll pop a link below so you can just register. It's free. And by the way, it's a 0-cell process. So it's a very safe space for everyone to be involved in, just to keep a community, a positive outset. We don't just talk about it, we live it. So we help people in a humble serving manner. So the principle, and I was talking about, do apologize for distracting a little bit, is that if we could imagine that whatever we can visualize, conceptualize consciously, the unconscious realm is kind of like our cloud software that can access the ether, and it can pull up that light, that information as we want it. So if we say we're hot and bothered, then all of a sudden the unconscious brain will make us hot and bothered, and we'll go out of our way to start to see hot and bothered, and it'll become a reality of my life. Okay, so the conversation is, it's a bit like a genie. So you rub the lamp of a genie, and I haven't got a prop here to share with you, I'm afraid, Gary, but you rub the lamp of the genie, and out pops a genie, which is a representation of your unconscious mind. It sits there and it says, your wish is my command. So if we then, male or female, makes no difference, if we then turn around and said something along to, I wish for whatever I'm thinking about in a conscious understanding, and the genie would just say, your wish is my command, and up pops that information. So we call this so within, so without. So whatever I want to see, I will see. Whatever I want to believe is my reality. Yeah. So now let's go back a second. So there's the conscious and conscious understanding. So if I ask something of myself, my unconscious brain will start to receive that command and start to evolve. And we could easily say something along the lines, it will start to fabricate it, it will start to assimilate it for me in the conscious world that I'm facing. But if you think about it realistically, if I was to buy a brand new car, and let's just make this up and say we bought a brand new Bentley, and it is a blue, deep blood blue color. So I bought a blue colored Bentley. And the moment I've purchased it, I'm driving home from the dealership. So I've made a conscious decision that this is my car. All of a sudden, the unconscious realm will start to attract, because the first thing I'm thinking about myself is, I need to recognize that this is actually my car. So my brain will be stimulating a conscious loop saying, this is a Bentley, this is probably a Bentley Arnage, or it's a Bentley, whatever it is, just stick with the Arnage, yes? So it's a Bentley Arnage, it's my vehicle, and I should know what that looks like. So it's a blue Bentley, it's an Arnage, and that's my vehicle. Does that make sense? So what happens is my brain is now being trained to say, look for this vehicle, otherwise you will not recognize it and you walk in somebody else's car or you'll get lost. Yes? So it's kind of a low level clarity. So the unconscious brain is now sat with a command in a conscious realm, and it's sitting there saying, unconsciously, I need to produce the information of looking for this Bentley so it doesn't go unconnected, so I don't miss it, so I don't lose the car, for crying out loud. So I then jump in the car and I'm driving home, because now I'm on the inside of the car, I don't need to be looking for the Bentley. But unconsciously, the brain is still commanding the unconscious brain to find the Bentley. So as you're driving home, let's say I live in Peterborough and I'm coming from London, I will principally probably see a number of Bentleys en route on the way back. And then actually, the particular color that I probably had, like a Moroccan blue, all of a sudden I start to see more Moroccan blue vehicles on the road. The question here isn't the fact that all of a sudden the universe, God, started to create these vehicles in my wake, or just because I purchased them, that loads more people have purchased them, or the manufacturers created more vehicles. The reality is that my unconscious brain is actually fulfilling a command of finding that vehicle, because it's in my conscious question. Does that make sense? And just to complete this, and then I'll ask you to reframe that if you can, Gary. As soon as I'm looking for that vehicle, I'm in that loop. My unconscious brain is recognizing those vehicles around, and as it's recognized them, my conscious brain acknowledges that it's seeing those other cars. Does that make sense? So it's saying, oh my God, there's another one. Oh my God, there's another one. Oh my God, there's another one. So there is the conscious trigger that I mustn't forget my car, so I need to recognize this vehicle. The unconscious brain says, I shall recognize that vehicle for you. It starts to recognize lots of those vehicles, and the conscious brain accepts and closes the learning loop by saying, I've seen another one, I've seen another one, I've seen another one, I've seen another one. And then you can make your own deductions from that and saying, oh my God, my car's so popular, it's so common, even though it may not be. Does that make sense, Karen?
Totally, Sukhi. And you've used the Bentley Enage as the example. I'm going to use the new number plate every year, where they suddenly have a new number plate and you've just driven off your car. And for those of you who've done this, I'm sure you remember it. Or even if you haven't, but you still look out for the new number plate in August or March. And as you're driving along, think, oh, I haven't seen any new number plates today. In fact, I haven't seen any new number plates at all. It's the 1st of March. Where are they? So that's the conscious thinking. So as you're then driving, looking around, driving properly, the unconscious is then looking for those new number plates, the 68, the 69, the whatever figure it may be in whichever year. And as the unconscious is looking, it's picking out those numbers. It makes you look. You're now going through a loop. And when you recognize one, and another, and another, and they seem to be in a line, a bit like buses, you never see one and then they all come together. And then you get the consciousness saying, oh, wow, there must be loads of new number plates on the road at the moment.
Yes, spot on, Gary. Absolutely spot on. And just to share with yourself, I had this discussion. If you can imagine that the consciousness is asking for a trigger, the unconsciousness is producing that trigger, the evidence, and the conscious brain, has to acknowledge it. That's the key. It's the loop that has to happen. So this must be happening at every single time you learn something new. This is kind of the science behind the shift in your brain every time you learn something new. That's what we're trying to talk about with the CUC Learning Loop. This is a tool or a part of your identification, which is inherent in your psychology. You will always have what we classify as a conscious-unconscious consciousness loop. This basically means, this actually means that we are constantly trying to learn something new, but you can't actually learn something new unless you've accepted consciously that you've actually acknowledged the fact that you've learned it, or that you've made a decipher. What we call is a reflection. So until you reflect upon it and make a decision on what you've actually learned, it doesn't work. So I said to some of our clients and some of our tribe and some of our mentees and education students, and I said to them that CUC loop is a consciousness loop, and all learning and all state is triggered by this one movement. One of my very, very close friends, brothers, mentees, and business partners is Jatinder Palahar. And he said, in a social environment, he said, well, Sukhi, are you telling me that meditation, which is truly an unconscious understanding or unconscious clarity or a learning, is conscious? And this was such a deep question and such perfectly poised. And if you get to ever turn up at some of our trainings and educations, and I am humbled to experience your questioning, you'll realize that I don't back off any questions, and I always try to deliver fully. So the principle of conversation that I'm saying is that I just said to him, I said, brilliant stimulation. And I said, brilliant assimilation immediately. So let's work this out. So I said, I'm not saying that meditation itself is conscious, because that was what his question was. I said, but let me just ask you a simple question. What do you do to get yourself into a state of meditation? What specifically are you going through process-wise to get yourself into meditation? And he would say, well, I'm breathing, and I'm this, and I'm that, and whatever his principles were. The question would have been that if you're breathing, how do you know you're breathing? And then if you're breathing, what exactly are you asking yourself? So it's actually a conscious request and conscious trigger to jump into the unconscious realm. And guess what? You can't get into meditation without conscious triggers. And this is the key. And then once you're out of the unconscious learning realm, if you don't acknowledge that you're out of the conscious learning realm, you don't really know that you're out of it. And secondly, you don't actually receive the learning through the reflection process of what you actually learned. Because if you're doing it for relaxation, you may be relaxed in your meditation, but unless you're out of it and you acknowledge the fact consciously that, oh, yeah, I feel good. Until you've acknowledged it, that loop doesn't complete and you don't get the learning. Make sense?
Perfectly. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody to also watch episode 18 when it comes up, because I've now thought, and we discussed this briefly, watch episode 18, folks, because we're now going to put the links in between the stages of learning and show how this works in real life, in other examples. So watch out for episode 18 coming up. So Sukhi, thank you for that. I just want to look at the learning tips now.
Can I just add something extra there, Gary?
Please do.
Just to install, people who understand what we call the 4 stages of learning, and we're going to cover this in episode 18, like you just said. But the 4 stages of learning are unconscious incompetence, which means that I kind of don't know what I don't know. Then it shifts to conscious incompetence, that I know now what I don't know. It then shifts to conscious competence, which means that I now know how to do it, and I know how to do it. And then it goes into unconscious competence, which is the 4th stage. So we'll cover this in 18 in a lot more depth, but how does one move from one state to another? It's the CUC loop. The CUC loop makes you consciously aware of the change awareness. You go from conscious trigger, a question, to unconscious fulfillment, and then conscious acknowledgement, CUC. And then it shifts you to the next stage, and then shifts you to the next stage, and next stage, next stage. But we'll talk about that much more in depth next time. So if you're ever stuck in life, ask yourself a simple question consciously: why am I stuck? And if you want to hark back to DFT episode 13, when we talk in a lot of detail about the DFT, again, part of the SynaGus method, by the way, DFT clarity and DFT focus, the 7 stages or the 7 steps, please hark back and watch that again. When we're talking about getting yourself shifted forward, you can do it in a very quick manner by saying consciously, what's the challenge? Unconsciously accept the challenge, whatever comes up in it, it bubbles up and says, that's the problem. And then consciously accept that you're going to do something about it. You'll move yourself forward. That's the CUC loop. And I hope all of the Inspired Tribe consistently use, enjoy, and most importantly, share with others. That's our real focus in our life. I am really not trying to share this content on YouTube and locations like this for the principle. I'm sharing it for the reason that I want you to learn and share with your children and children of tomorrow, if that's okay. Thank you, Gary.
Sukhi, fascinating. And again, it's a little in-depth visit to the inner sanctum of Sukhi. So, power tip roundup time. Power tip 1. We spoke about the SynaGus method, what it is and how it came about, its spiritual element, the inner and outer worlds, and the deep psychometrics that are involved. We then looked at the CUC Learning Loop and what is CUC. So we looked at conscious, unconscious consciousness, and the scientific application of a tool that assists you to shift in your learnings. Power tip 3 was, how is the loop constructed? We looked at the 10% head. We looked at the 90% unconscious and equated it to a bit like cloud learning. We then looked at the Genie analogy of, you rub the lamp, you think of what you want, and it poof materializes. So within, so without, we mentioned. And then we looked at in-depth power tip 5, which is the unconscious mind, which helps evolve a solution when you ask the question. It attracts and looks for other like-minded ideas. And we used the Bentley as an idea. We used the number plate recognition and seeing new number plates. But the key to this loop is in step 6, power tip 6, where you have the consciousness must confirm it. This must be the acknowledgement. And then we discussed the conversation that Sukhi had with one of his key team, with Jatinder, and the meditation is conscious. That in order to get into meditation, you must think, and then looking at the closeness of the breath, how you breathe is a thought process, and it's a conscious trigger. And then finally, we looked at power tip 8, which was episode 13 of the Daily Tips Show, where we talk about DFT, consciousness, focus, and clarity. And that all parts of that is how to do the CUC loop effectively and quickly. So I do hope that you found today's episode enlightening, informative, and just a glimpse into the world of Sukhi. Remember, please do comment, like, and any questions that you might have, please do send them. Remember to watch SukhiWahiwala's official YouTube channel and look out for him on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And remember, as I said each time, please tell your friends, please tell your family, and please tell anybody that you think this might be useful. And remember, look out for episode 18 next time, where we look about the 4 stages of learning and how the CUC loop helps move you between each of those stages. So until next time, take care and bye.